Hello and welcome to the Digital Digest, your weekly breakfast of insights, tips and tricks and general information that will help anyone trying to move things forward in this digital world of accounting. This show is brought to you both by the Digital Disruptors and SB Digital, which are pushing the boundaries of this digital accounting space. I'm your host, Ryan Pearcy, and I'm joined by the infamous John Toon as we dive into the realms of AI. We've already done an intro session a month ago with Rebecca Williams talking about what AI is and how that's kind of evolved in the accounting space over the last few years. And in this session, we're going to dive into AI in the accounting ledgers. Now, what the heck do we mean by this? So, John, there's been a lot of change, I guess, recently with large language models. When we're talking about AI in accounting ledgers, how would you define that now?
I think if we're focusing in on like large language models, what we're talking about here really is kind of interactive assistants that sit within the general ledger products that we're familiar with. So I know we're going to talk about this. So we've got one that's in Sage, we've got one that's in QuickBooks, we've got one that's in Xero, and I'm sure there'll be more to come from other vendors as well. And this isn't necessarily new in terms of having an assistant that either sits inside an existing product or maybe sits as a bolt-on, because Sage had a chatbot called Peg that from a few years ago that came and went. And there was also a couple of other apps in the Xero app store in the early days which were trying to allow you to interact through conversational means with the data that was in Xero. I think what was fair to say about those early products was that because they were fairly fixed in the way that you can interact with them, it was a typical kind of chatbot experience that maybe you get with customer services things, where you get to a point where it's sort of almost computer says no, and then you get handed off, and it's not a brilliant experience. With the ability with large language models, we've got the potential here for the conversation to be much more contextual, much more natural, and it doesn't have to be driven down certain pathways to deliver a response all the time. So I guess that's what we're kind of looking for. And from some of the demos that we've seen and some of the stuff that people have shown off recently, you're thinking about not just being able to ask questions about the data in your general ledger. So how much profit have I made last month, for example, but it increasingly being able to potentially correct or change invoices that are in the system, identify ways to save money, so things like that. And so I'm sure we can cover that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, I mean, it's that interaction, isn't it? And it's taken, and I'll get this is really simplifying, but taking the power of ChatGPT essentially and bringing it into the finance systems, the same as what we've got with Microsoft Copilot bringing into the Microsoft suite. We're seeing that come into Sage, Intuit, not just QuickBooks Online, but Intuit itself and Xero. The other side, or other, I guess, systems we've seen this come into is NetSuite. We've talked about this on the podcast, that NetSuite have brought large language models into their product. We've not really seen anything in the mid-tier space, the likes of iimplicit, Accounts IQ, Xledger. I expect those to come out. Obviously, they're looking across a vast, I guess, a bigger range of data compared to the smaller systems. So there may be a lot more they need to play with there. But this is an ever-changing space, and I'm sure if you're listening to this, it's probably changed from when we're talking about it right now. So the main thing is you need to constantly keep updated, and we're going to, over these shows, just give you insights, updates of what's happening in not just the finance ledgers, but the other areas that affect the accounting space. So, all right, we've talked about the big three, and that's what we're going to focus on. So Intuit Assist, Sage Copilot, and Just Ask Xero, or JAX. Now, John, which came out first and which came out last in that order?
Well, don't hold me to this, but I think Intuit Assist came out first, followed by Sage Copilot, and then JAX, or Just Ask Xero. Seems to be more than a mouthful that needs to be, in that order. And I think what's interesting to me, at least, is as you've rightly said before, the Intuit Assist is not just a QuickBooks thing. It's going to be embedded into all of the products, and we've already seen that having put it into QuickBooks, it's now in MailChimp as well, and obviously Intuit have a plethora of products in their suite that they could apply this to. So you can imagine that could become incredibly powerful. Sage have indicated that whilst their Copilot is sitting just within sort of the business cloud accounting products at the moment, that their intention is to bring it into the entire suite of their products. So Sage 50, Intact, their HR and payroll systems, and a bunch of others. And again, you're assuming that you buy all of those products from Sage, you could then see how that could be quite fascinating to see how you could maybe utilize that to interact with there. I mean, could you imagine, for example, being able to talk to Sage Copilot and maybe onboard a new member of staff into your HR and payroll system, for example? Quite interesting. And then with Jax for Xero, we've seen it. We've seen the demos for the general ledger product on its own. I don't think we've seen anything for the sort of payroll products and Xero Practice Management Manager and things like that at the moment. So early days, but early days for all of these products, I guess, and they're all pretty much still in some kind of beta testing, essentially, with either current access available or access, for example, with Jax, I think in August, and I guess as soon as we're able to get our hands on them and start to interact with them, we'll get a real feel for how useful they are, but also the vendors themselves will start to learn what kind of questions are typically being asked and be able to train their models more effectively and hone that over time, because that's really the most important thing. Is they rely on us interacting with these models to then make them even better, which it's a symbiotic relationship, I guess.
Yeah, we're making the robot smarter. That's essentially what we're doing. But I think I think Intuit announced Intuit Assist first, but I believe it actually came out in the UK after Sage, because I know they released it in the US first. I think the only time it's only really come over to the UK with a recent release from MailChimp, but the timings I guess are less relevant now, because everything regarding these co-pilots are about what's coming in the future. As you say, a lot of it's in beta, a lot of it's learning and evolving, and there's not much you can actually do with any of this right now. So a lot of this we're talking about is where it's going rather than what is possible. And I know that Xero probably had to make an announcement earlier than they'd like. I think they wanted to announce Jax at XeroCon, but because the other two had already announced their co-pilots, they felt they had to bring something forward. But yeah, at XeroCon, they were talking about the fact that they want you to be able to interact with Xero through the likes of WhatsApp, through Slack, so that you are communicating whatever channel you want to, but you can interact with your Xero system, via connected API, basically. So that's going to be really interesting. That, I think, is where the true power comes, rather than have to go directly through the program. You can just communicate whatever tool you want to.
I'd agree with that completely, and I think that's probably, and again, I could be wrong with this, but I think that's what probably sets Jax aside from the other products that we've seen in terms of the elevation of the large language models, because as far as I understand it, with Intuit Assist and with Sage Copilot, you're doing it within product and having those conversations within product, or at least within the app. Whereas, as you say, with Jax, they're talking about having the ability to do that within WhatsApp, within Slack, and hopefully it'll come to things like Teams as well in the future and other things. Ironically, going back to the conversation we had previously, where we were talking about old chatbots that used to interact with these things, that was how they were implemented and iterated, was that they were looking to put it in a platform that you were familiar with and not have to constantly go and jump into Xero or Sage or QuickBooks to be able to interact with the data, and that for me makes logical sense. Clearly there's going to be some trust about this, in terms of if you're sitting in Slack and saying send an invoice to XYZ Limited, and you're not actually in the product, you might not be comfortable that it's actually happening, or might want that confirmation that it's actually been done and delivered. So I think there's going to be some of those kind of initial problems to overcome, and it engenders some level of trust with users to sort of encourage them to interact with these products in certain ways.
Yeah, it's that balance of security and functionality, isn't it? We want everything to be done, but in a completely secure way, which isn't always possible from day one. We have to find where those where comfort is, between those grey lines. Now, the most exciting one, I think, personally, is Intuit Assist, because of their plethora of programs that can go across. You're talking about MailChimp, obviously from a marketing perspective. You've got Credit Karma in the US that also has some impact in the UK. And then obviously you've got the QuickBooks platform. And something that I know they've been doing over in the US is they're building these large language models into their personal tax program, TurboTax, and being able to automatically start creating your personal tax return based on you telling it information about how you earn money, which is just insane, right? That once that properly starts working, that will have a huge impact on the accounting space, especially in the UK, for just personal tax compliance. Someone can just talk to a device, tell them what it's how it's earned money, and it creates at least a draft tax return and quotes what I guess tax code it's referenced. I mean, that is a complete game changer, surely, for the entire accounting industry, John.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there with the Intuit Assist in terms of being multi-product across that great range of things that they've got, but also they've got a real nailed down focus of looking at things like delivering that tax return, and I'm fairly certain that they've probably they're not just leveraging a large language model, but they've probably got some robotic process automation happening in the background, some machine learning to take that information from your salary information, your investment information and stuff, and then take that to map it into the tax return. But that is fundamentally probably one of the biggest time challenges that accounting firms have. And we talked about this in previous episodes, haven't we? In terms of that manual data entry, taking it from source documentation to system. It's one of the reasons why products like Dext and Onto Entry are so popular, because no one really wants to do that, but everyone wants to have it done with high speed and high accuracy. And isn't the iteration of what Intuit are doing with that, though, is also it's not just about saving time and effort for the accountant or for the end user, the customer, but it's also about being interactive and then delivering back something more. So it is very fascinating to see. It's also is sort of starting to nibble away at the kind of service that we as accountants, tax advisors, etc., would deliver. So again, we have to be sort of cognizant of that. Is that that should be something that we want to be involved in. It should be something that we want to embrace. And maybe what we need to think about is like, do we need to sort of grade our client base on these are the kinds of clients that we might want TurboTax to deliver a service on. Now, we have to talk about this in the context that I think it's only available in the US and not in the UK at the moment, for example. But at some point in the future, if this comes into the UK, do we want to sort of say this is the type of client where they're going to get a service delivered through this large language model service, and then this cohort of clients are going to still get the personal service, but maybe we'll take some of the automation from the large language model and deliver part of it through that way. So it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge for businesses and the models, and accounting firms.
Yeah, definitely. And although TurboTax is just a US product at the moment, we are starting to see the beginnings of this in other products in the UK. So I know that CCH are building that, I guess, the extraction, the OCR, the automation side, not necessarily the large language model, the interaction part, but the extraction of data you collect from your clients to pre-create a personal, draft the personal tax return, which potentially gets rid of the entire junior level of, tax preparer in the UK. And I know Practice Gateway, a TTEC product, are building a similar thing. So that is already in existence. It's very early on. And as you say, John, it's at that point where the models are having to be fed a lot of information. So they might be in certain areas, take a P60, it's 99.99% accurate. But if you then take like dividend receipts, where it can vary slightly, you need to train it with lots of different types of documents. Similar to how Receipt Bank back in the day learnt, there was someone in the back kind of training it, but it was learning and like ingesting different document types and then going, okay, well, this fit, I've seen this template before, I apply it. And that's essentially what the kind of the products are doing. It's just I think in the UK, we'll be a little slower to see that the LLM part come into the personal tax preparation, but we have to be aware of it. And I know we've talked about it at the Festival of Accounting and Bookkeeping we talked about it on the podcast, the fact that the culmination of cloud technology and large language models is now seeing that tipping point of actually having a massive effect on the UK accounting industry. And although we were frustrated as an industry for so long with everyone going, oh, we need to all do advisory, realistically, that is where we're going. And I think that actually, as firms, we've just evolved naturally towards that over time, rather than just having to flip directly into it. But I don't know too much about the Sage Copilot system, right, John? I know you talked about what's coming down the road. What does that look like? What are they trying to do here?
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen of the sort of the demos and some of the stuff that they showcased so far is that it's trying to help you utilize the data that's in your accounting system in Sage to make better decisions. For example, so for example, you can ask questions around who should I buy product off if it's in the stock system and you've got pricing data in there, and you need to reorder stock to build a product and sell something to a customer. Those kind of things, which you might just normally do through a search within Sage and searching through the data and going, right, okay, where do I buy these widgets from? And it comes from 2 or 3 suppliers. You can now ask it things like that, which I think is a really intelligent way of sort of leveraging that. There's also the ability then to sort of interact more with some of the reporting functionality that's in Sage. I mean, I think that's always been a bit of a bugbear for Sage users, is the reporting functionality is sort of, we had that experiment with Salesforce. We had some experimentation with getting it in AWS and other things, and now they kind of settled that down. The ability to sort of say, can you alert me if, I don't know, my cash flow goes below a certain level, those kind of things, is coming into the demonstration product that we've seen. And again, I think that's just really, really handy, isn't it, as a business owner, to be able to sort of say, if I set certain parameters, I'll get a notification, or even get the large language model to suggest those to you based on the historic trends. And I think that's where you start to see that. And then there's other stuff where you can actually get it to create reports. So you can sort of say, right, can you forecast out my cash flow for the next few months and things like that. Again, stuff that you would maybe take 1 or 2 clicks to get through in Sage itself. But and to be fair, most of the other products on the market, you've now got the ability to do that. And what we're increasingly seeing with these products at varying degrees is the ability to interact with voice as well. Now, all of them have alluded to the fact that that's coming. I don't think it's there in any of the betas at the moment. But again, that changes the dynamic, doesn't it, in terms of how you interact with things. I mean, I know people still struggle with Siri and Google Assistant and other things in terms of how they do that. But it is becoming increasingly normal to interact with these kind of voice assistants in certain ways. I think increasingly that we'll start to see that coming more and more into focus. And then I think the last thing that I've seen in the Sage Copilot is that they've got the ability, if people have got queries on invoices when they've been sent through the platform, is that it will flag those up and it'll then try and help you to resolve those queries and stuff, which again, we've seen probably in other tools that, like Microsoft Copilot, for example, when you're triaging your inbox and stuff, helping you to respond to maybe a complaint, for example, those kind of things. So I think those kind of things all just lend themselves, don't they, to just trying to make the process of running a business a little bit more easy and give you a different way of interacting with the data that you've got.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a bit cautious regarding voice assistants when you're looking at finance, because you're generally out in an office a lot of the time or around people, and you don't want to ask a sensitive bit of information via voice, and then it tells you have £500,000 in the bank. Oh, great. Now all my colleagues know I've got that. So it's just something that always, to me, thinks it goes against what is quite a sensitive topic by talking in an open format. But what I love about the what they're trying to do with Sage is how you could interact with different products. Like you say, right? You could say, I've just met this person. I'm tempted to hire them. Like, what's my financial exposure over the next 3 months if I hire this person, assuming that it takes 3 months for them to start generating income, because they've got Future as a forecasting tool, they've got Sage HR, you've got the Sage people side, all of those could interact depending on what you're using. But then what I also think this is doing is encouraging all of you, if you're a business is to use every tool in their suite. So it's a big sales tool for the likes of Xero, Sage, Intuit to go, well, we need you to be using our entire suite to get the most out of it. That app stack, where we are now, right? You pick the best in breed, starts then come towards actually consolidating down, and that's something we've predicted on the podcast, that we're starting to see that tipping point. We're seeing a lot of acquisitions at the moment. We're seeing people disappear from the market. Although we were expanding, I think we're going to start consolidating a bit. So yeah, it's going to be exciting times.
Yeah, I mean, I think what would be really interesting for me, I mean, it's great to see these in the suites of products that these vendors own. And again, it's very early days. But we talked on the podcast, didn't we, about how we're starting to see things like Chrome extensions being utilized to change the UX of products. And we've seen a couple of those recently. But could you imagine the power of having something like Sage Copilot? Like you say, it connects to the products they've got, but if you then connected it to something else, and we're then able to interact with that additional product, presumably through the API, to then gain even more insights and stuff. I think that'd be massively powerful and really, really interesting way of doing it, because one of the other examples they've got on the Sage Copilot is for if you're sitting in the Sage Accountants platform, is it will give you a notification around things like tax returns not being completed. And then would allow you to start following up on that. But can you imagine if that was connected into HMRC, and then you could sort of say, right, okay, you've not got these tax returns started, but I can see that these 10 tax returns have just got employment income, and so you can just go straight through, pull the P60 data up, and just process it. And that would be awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, we're in a realm at the moment of potential, right? Everyone's excited about what is possible, but there's always going to be a dip where we then become frustrated because it's not doing what we hoped it would do, before we can start climbing out of that as the products evolve over time. It's that normal change curve, and we're going to see that through AI. But let's bring this down to reality. Although there are co-pilots out there, they are quite minimal at the moment in what you can do with them. But please do interact with them. Please do as much as you can, because it will learn, it will evolve, and it will get we'll get there a lot more quickly to actually something that has a tangible effect on how we work. So I guess as a summary from this, please do use them, even if it's small at this point, because it helps the model learn. I feel that is a great place to wrap up this week's show. Hopefully this episode has provided you with valuable insights you can take forward. Please do check out the show notes for links to Digital Disruptors, SB Digital, and the thousands of co-pilots we have talked about. If you want to ensure you catch future episodes, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, and make sure you check out for the release every Thursday morning. We look forward to speaking to you next week.